Here's the good news. Unlike most of the Valorant decision making, when to push is actually really simple and easy to get the hang of. Most of improving this area of your game is learning and cutting out a few easy to fix mistakes. There's no bad news. Improving your pushing and flanking is going to set up round wins and will apply an immense amount of pressure on your opponents even if they don't know it until it's too late. It's all positivity today while we're going over when to push on defense. Hello everyone, I'm Achax and let's get started. First, let's talk about why you want to push, because there is a common misconception that pushing is always bad. The goal of pushing through on defense is to close the net on the attackers by gaining map control, which has a couple massive benefits. You gain intel and map control, which is good, but the two really huge benefits are to set up for a retake and deny a rotate. When defenders flank behind attackers, they mount an attack from a different direction during a retake. This will reduce the number of places attackers can hide and pins them in certain spots, which is the net I mentioned earlier really constricting and allowing you to win retakes. You can also deny a rotate. Late in the round, attackers will often retreat and rotate quickly if they have been prevented from taking one site. Your unexpected presence behind them will lock down a round and can score for you an easy 2, 3, or even 4K. There are a couple basic implications the intent of your round-winning push has. 1. As I mentioned, you don't actually want to run into an opponent while pushing behind them. You don't want to make noise, so you should be walking. 2. You don't want to just push until you see an opponent. Pushing attacker territory is a dangerous move, so don't take more territory than you have to. Instead, push, find a safe spot, and wait. As the round develops, the attackers will either commit, prompting you to push more, or rotate, at which point you can stop them. There absolutely is a certain situation where you should go for frags, and we will get to that near the end of the video. Now that we know why we are pushing, let's talk about when to do so. First off, you have to have intel. The point of pushing is to start closing the net on the attackers and make a retake super easy or an attacker rotate impossible. The later in the round, the higher the quality of intel. At some point, the attackers will no longer have time to rotate successfully, at which point the intel is perfect and you should accelerate your push. You want to make it to a good position to start retaking site as soon as you can, but you should wait for your teammates to apply pressure from defender spawn areas first. Whether or not you have enough intel will depend on how you've read the other team so far and how late in the round it currently is. Anything from a Sova arrow to your teammate spotting 4 opponents can be your cue to push, depending on what the other team has done so far. 2. You have to be able to give up your immediate area and your own value in the round, if you're pushing earlier than 30-ish seconds left. Just like in chess, it's sometimes worth it to sacrifice pieces. If you are Brimstone and your retake is centered around your abilities, then pushing does not make sense because your value in the retake outweighs the potential value from a push. If you are solo holding a site, or your utility is going to be crucial in maintaining control of that site, then you do not want to push. If you have a reliable teammate who can hold the site, then that is a good time to push. Frequently though, you're going to have to weigh the risks of whether or not you want to push, and that will be your own judgment call. A piece of advice heard in investing is consider the money you've invested already lost, and that's the same general line of thinking a flank should yield. If you can't afford to lose your own personal value and the area that you control, then you should not be flanking. 3. You have to be positioned so that a flank is faster than a rotate by the time the spike is planted. If you want to flank, you should be able to mostly walk through attacker territory faster than sprinting through defender territory. And 4. It has to be unpredictable. If you flank frequently, opponents will wait for you. Push intermittently, and try to push in the second half of the round. And 5, the most important one, this is a counter strategy, not to be confused with a strategy. It's designed to penalize the other team for the tactical error of stacking players to one side, especially if they never rotate and are not covering their flanks. It is intended to solve the very specific problem that the attackers continually take site by attacking quickly although not necessarily early and with overwhelming numbers. This is a very common problem in lower ranks especially. If your opponents are running a default, which means splitting up all around the map, holding for a push, or something like that, you would be better served holding site compared to pushing. There are also a couple mistakes you want to make sure to avoid that can turn a sure win into an unnecessary loss. The first is impatience. As I mentioned, you don't actually want to run into any opponents until during the attacker's site commitment or just before the plant. A lot of incorrect flanks are a result of unrealistic assessment of reward or perceived elimination ownership. Unrealistic assessment of reward is the misconception often founded in impatience that if you see an opponent you can eliminate them. An opponent catching you during a movement stage of your push will put you at a disadvantage, and it's unrealistic to think that you can do more good in that disadvantageous position than in an advantageous position from sight. The other one that I hear about surprisingly frequently is perceived elimination ownership. You have probably heard the phrase directed at someone on your team, "Hey, you stole my kill," which could mean anything from they lit an opponent 149 before a teammate finished them off, to they saw an opponent and thought they could have gotten the frag if their teammate had left the whole thing alone. Nobody owns an elimination, and pushing to try to frag the last few with a numbers advantage is an excellent way to choke an easy round every now and again, and certainly a great way to lose more than you gain. The second is overcommitment. A lot of players feel that once they start a push, they can't back out. So, when they get caught on a tripwire or spotted, they continue pushing. You absolutely do not have to continue a push if you have a reason not to. Flanking routes are often pretty exposed to attackers, and worse, you probably won't be able to fall back. And, on top of that, you'll almost definitely be outnumbered. If the opponents know where you are, relocate immediately. If you have to fall back to site, that's perfectly fine. You haven't lost anything, and you've probably gained a lot of good temporary intel and map control, while forcing the opponents to clear out every angle all the way to your site. Getting spotted includes getting a pick. If you score a pick, you should fall back. This is probably the most frequent way a flank ends, especially early in the round. While pushing through is the goal, finding a pick isn't that bad of an ending either, as long as you don't get traded. Players who make these mistakes tend to push with little intel out of impatience, or because they want to get the most frags, as if they are racing their teammates. They push until they see an opponent and they don't fall back. As a result, these pushes are usually ill-timed, unnecessary, and end badly. If you've been making these mistakes so far, it's not a big deal. Moving forward, you can cut these mistakes out, win more games, and die less. I mentioned earlier that there are a few situations where you do want to go for frags on a flank way before the plant, and we will go over those now. When the net is closed so tightly that the opponents cannot move forward or backward, they are pinned. A good time to attack these pinned players is as soon as they start fighting your teammates. They probably won't expect to be flanked and they will be distracted. The second situation to go for a frag is when you are behind someone who hasn't noticed you, but they suddenly turn around and notice you. At that point, just get the frag and then fall back. It's also a good idea to go for a frag if you have a 2 or more man advantage, especially if your crosshair is on a player and they haven't even noticed you yet. Having a 3 or more man advantage should lock down the round. Provided that you steer clear of these two common mistakes and make sure that pushing is a good idea, flanking can be a huge, even round-winning advantage that will allow you to close the net on your opponents, taking away their map control, eliminating their options, and probably their players. I hope this video had some value for you. Best of luck and have a great day.